Unitarian Protests by Charles Lamb. In a letter to a friend of that persuasion newly married. Dear M, though none of your acquaintance can with greater sincerity congratulate you upon this happy conjuncture than myself, one of the oldest of them, it was with pain I found you, after the ceremony, depositing in the vestry room what is called a protest. I thought you superior to this little sophistry. What, after submitting to the service of the Church of England, after consenting to receive a boon from her, in the person of your amiable consort, was it consistent with sense or common good manners to turn round upon her and flatly taunt her with false worship? This language is a little of the strongest in your books and from your pulpits, though there it may well enough be excused from religious zeal and the native warmth of nonconformity. But at the altar, the Church of England altar, adopting her forms and complying with her requisitions to the letter, to be consistent, together with the practice, I fear, you must drop the language of dissent. You are no longer sturdy non-cons, you are their occasional conformists. You submit to accept the privileges communicated by a form of words, exceptionable and perhaps justly in your view, but so submitting, you have no right to quarrel with the ritual which you have just condescended to owe an obligation to. They do not force you into their churches. You come voluntarily, knowing the terms. You marry in the name of the Trinity. There is no evading this by pretending that you PG 311 take the formula with your own interpretation. And so long as you can do this, where is the necessity of protesting? For the meaning of a vow is to be settled by the sense of the imposer, not by any forced construction of the taker. Else might all vows, and oaths too, be eluded with impunity. You marry then essentially as Trinitarians, and the altar no sooner satisfied than, hey presto, with the celerity of a juggler, you shift habits and proceed pure Unitarians again in the vestry. You cheat the church out of a wife and go home smiling in your sleeves that you have so cunningly despoiled the Egyptians. In plain English, the church has married you in the name of so-and-so, assuming that you took the words in her sense but you outwitted her. You assented to them in your sense only, and took from her what, upon a right understanding, she would have declined to give you. This is the fair construction to be put upon all Unitarian marriages, as at present contracted, and as long as you Unitarians could salve your consciences with the equivoque, I do not see why the established church should have troubled herself at all about the matter. But the protesters necessarily see further. They have some glimmerings of the deception. They apprehend a flaw somewhere. They would fain be honest, and yet they must marry notwithstanding. For honesty's sake, they are fain to dishonestate themselves a little. Let me try the very words of your own protest, to see what confessions we can pick out of them. As Unitarians, therefore, we, you and your newly espoused bride, most solemnly protest against the service, which yourselves have just demanded, because we are thereby called upon, not only tacitly to acquiesce, but to profess a belief in a doctrine which is a dogma, as we believe totally unfounded. But do you profess that belief during the ceremony, or are you only called upon for the profession but do not make it? If the latter, then you fall in with the rest of your more consistent brethren, who waive the protest. If the former, then, I fear, your protest cannot save you. Hard and grievous it is, that in any case an institution so broad and general, as the union of man and wife should be so cramped and straitened by the hands of an imposing hierarchy, that to plight troth to a lovely woman, a man must be necessitated to compromise his truth and faith to heaven. But so at PG 312 must be, so long as you choose to marry by the forms of the church over which that hierarchy presides. Therefore, say you, we protest. O poor and much fallen word protest? It was not so that the first heroic reformers protested. They departed out of Babylon once for good and all. They came not back for an occasional contact with her altars, a dallying and then a protesting against dalliance. They stood not shuffling in the porch with a popish foot within and its lame Lutheran fellow without, halting betwixt. These were the true Protestants. You are protesters. Besides the inconsistency of this proceeding, I must think it a piece of impertinence, unseasonable at least and out of place, to obtrude these papers upon the officiating clergyman, to offer to a public functionary an instrument which by the tenor of his function he is not obliged to accept, but rather he is called upon to reject. Is it done in his clerical capacity? He has no power of redressing the grievance. It is to take the benefit of his ministry and then insult him. If in his capacity of fellow Christian only, what are your scruples to him, so long as you yourselves are able to get over them, and do get over them by the very fact of coming to require his services? The thing you call a protest might with just as good a reason be presented to the churchwarden for the time being, to the parish clerk, or the pew opener. The Parliament alone can redress your grievance, if any. Yet I see not how with any grace your people can petition for relief, so long as, By the very fact of your coming to church to be married, they do bona fide and strictly relieve themselves. The upper house, in particular, is not unused to these same things called protests among themselves. How would this honorable body stare to find a noble lord conceding a measure, and in the next breath, by a solemn protest disowning it? A protest there is a reason given for noncompliance, not a subterfuge for an equivocal occasional compliance. It was reasonable in the primitive Christians to avert from their persons, by whatever lawful means, the compulsory eating of meats which had been offered unto idols. I dare say the Roman prefects and exarchats had plenty of petitioning in their days, but what would a Festus or Agrippa have replied to a petition to that effect, presented to him by some evasive Laodicean, with the very meat between his teeth, which he had been chewing voluntarily rather than abide the PG 313 penalty? Relief for tender consciences means nothing, where the conscience has previously relieved itself, that is, has complied with the injunctions which it seeks preposterously to be rid of. Relief for conscience there is properly none, but what by better information makes an act appear innocent and lawful, with which the previous conscience was not satisfied to comply. All else is but relief from penalties, from scandal incurred by a complying practice, where the conscience itself is not fully satisfied. But say you, we have hard measure. The Quakers are indulged with the liberty denied to us. They have, are, and dearly they have earned it. You have come in, as a sect at least, in the cool of the evening, at the 11th hour. The Quaker character was hardened in the fires of persecution in the 17th century. Not quite to the stake and faggot, but little short of that. They grew up and thrived against noisome prisons, cruel beatings, whippings, stockings. They have since endured a century or two of scoffs, contempts. They have been a byword and a nayword. They have stood unmoved, and the consequence of long conscientious resistance on one part is invariably, in the end, remission on the other. The legislature, that denied you the tolerance, which I do not know that at that time you even asked, gave them the liberty which, without granting, they would have assumed. No penalties could have driven them into the churches. This is the consequence of entire measures. Had the early Quakers consented to take oaths, leaving a protest with the clerk of the court against them in the same breath with which they had taken them, do you, in your conscience, think that they would have been indulged at this day in their exclusive privilege of affirming? Let your people go on for a century or so, marrying in your own fashion, and I will warrant them before the end of it, the legislature will be willing to concede to them more than they at present demand. Either the institution of marriage depends not for its validity upon hypocritical compliances with the ritual of an alien church, and then I do not see why you cannot marry among yourselves, as the Quakers, without their indulgence, would have been doing to this day, or it does depend upon such ritual compliance, and then in your protests you offend against a divine ordinance. I have read in the Essex Street Liturgy a form for the celebration of marriage. Why is this PG 314 become a dead letter? Oh, it has never been legalized. That is to say, in the laws it is no marriage. But do you take upon you to say, in the view of the gospel it would be none? Would your own people at least look upon a couple so paired to be none? But the case of dowries, alimonies, inheritances, and which depend for their validity upon the ceremonial of the church by law established, are these nothing? That our children are not legally filii nullius, is this nothing? I answer, nothing. To the preservation of a good conscience, nothing. To a consistent Christianity, less than nothing. Sad worldly thorns they are indeed, and stumbling blocks, well worthy to be set out of the way by a legislature calling itself Christian, but not likely to be removed in a hurry by any shrewd legislators, who perceive that the petitioning complainants have not so much as bruised a shin in the resistance, but prudently declining the briars and the prickles, nestle quietly down in the smooth two-sided velvet of a protesting occasional conformity. I am, dear sir, with much respect, yours and C. Elia.